Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry. I'm here with Mike Simmons, of course, but we have another special guest. This week we have Pam Boiros. Pam is the owner of Bridge Marketing Advisors. Mike, tell us about Pam, how you got to know her, and then we'll bring her on and have a good talk.
So Pam and I met a number of years ago when I was over at a company. I was with SmartForce. We were acquired by SkillSoft, and Pam was part of the SkillSoft organization. And a couple of months beforehand had gone through a similar acquisition process when Books 24/7 was acquired by SkillSoft. So we've known each other for a number of years. We've had a chance to compete with each other in the market. When I moved over to Safari, we've always stayed in touch over the years, and I'm really excited to have Pam on the podcast. Thanks, Pam, for joining us.
Happy to be here, Mike. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, so Pam, you've had this amazing journey from very small organization. We were with Books 24/7, less than 50 people, acquired by a larger organization, then transitioned into an acquisition of a larger organization than that. And when you left SkillSoft, it was approximately 2,000 people inside the organization. And now you're starting over and building things up over the course of the past year. What have you learned over the course of the past year as you've kind of made that transition from small to medium sized to large to now working with early stage companies again?
Yeah, I've learned so much. And as a lifelong learner, which is one of the reasons why I chose sort of the corporate learning market as my field, it's been really fun. I think the number one lesson I have learned, which I always knew, but have put it in practice in the last year, is just how valuable your network is. And I think this is a key learning for sales professionals, particularly folks who are building up their career. My people came out of the woodwork to help me in terms of setting up this business, providing me leads of companies I should talk to. The kinds of companies that I work with now are early stage companies that have their vendors or solution providers in the corporate learning space. So they have either a software product or they have learning content or they have some other good or service that they're selling to corporate learning professionals. And that may seem like a really tiny niche market, but what I've found is actually there's a ton of investment, there's a ton of innovation, and budgets in this area are better than they've been in the last 10 years. So companies are investing and investors are investing in companies. So my network, going back to the point, I had always been a big proponent of using tools like LinkedIn, and personally had a philosophy that I wanted every person I was connected to on LinkedIn, I wanted them each to owe me a favor because I had done a favor for them. I'm a big one for pay it forward. So I never knew when I might need to maybe cash in some of those chips. But over the past year and a half, I have leveraged a lot of those relationships, and every single one of my current clients and the pipeline of clients that I also am expecting to do business with in 2018, every single one of those has come through a referral through my network. And as much as I was really looking forward to doing some cold calling and dusting off those sales skills from about 15 years ago, I have not had to do that. Everything has been a warm introduction. Everything has been somebody that I know. And that's just really fun and really interesting and lets me have control over the types of clients that I have.
So I imagine that you didn't start building that network 6 months before you started the business. Can you tell us a little bit about when you started building the network and how important that is?
Well, yeah, I've been building a network since before there were tools that make it easy. There's sort of no excuse now for not having an amazing network because tools like LinkedIn just give you the ability to do it. But I'm old enough to remember having sort of like Rolodex of business cards of people that I had met, staying in touch with them. One of the key lessons I learned in sales was about reaching out to people using this philosophy of why you, why now? Why am I reaching out to you, and why am I reaching out to you right now? So I always stayed in touch with people, either a quick voicemail, a quick email, or something, and said, hey, I saw this article, maybe think of you guys because I know this is in your industry, or hey, I see that you moved to company XYZ. My cousin works there as well. So always staying in touch. Now, there is absolutely no excuse for not doing that because LinkedIn gives you so much information. It used to be you knew where somebody worked, and then if they left and moved on to another company, you maybe knew the next place they went. But if they moved again, you lost track of them. And now LinkedIn gives you access to all those folks. And every single person, even if they're in their first professional job, has a built-in network with, for example, different groups that they belong to based on their interest or industry or the university that they went to. That's a great way to sort of build your network. But you're right, you have to invest in building it long before you need it. And then it'll be a lifelong valuable resource to you.
And I remember the Basho training way back when, SkillSoft, when Jeff Hoffman came in and ours on the West Coast, we had it in LA at a hotel near the airport. And that whole why you now concept always sticks because it's very customer centric. It's personal about the individual that you're attempting to make contact with. And we talk about sales as a thinking process. We also talk a lot about research. This is where it's important to do the research. As Pam talked about, you don't have any excuses to not be able to figure out some kind of context for the outreach that you're doing. You can see information that they share on LinkedIn. You can see information that they share on Twitter. You can see information that they share through other networks. So it's awesome to hear these concepts that have been out in the marketplace for a number of years still apply today. And I know, Jody, you and I had a conversation not that long ago about Zig Ziglar.
Yes, Mike, we did. Zig Ziglar is, my goodness, that's such an important figure in sales. But as you're saying, the foundations, that's why I turn to Zig. It's an important conversation to have.
So Pam, when you think of foundations, what are some of the other go-tos that you go to when it comes to helping organizations do better in the context of marketing or, getting their message out? Where do you tend to go?
Yeah. So I am a consummate reader. I constantly read, whether it's the trade press or the marketing press. I watch videos and TED Talks. I'm always looking for inspiration. I find Zig Ziglar also an inspiration. I think when something is classic, it never gets dated. I mean, I was at a conference this week, somebody was quoting Peter Drucker. 50, 60, 70-year-old advice. So I think those foundational factors are always a good basis to start because sales is a more complex process than ever, as I'm sure you and your listeners know. This is not an easy job. I have complete respect for salespeople, maybe because I've been a seller and I've been a sales manager, and that makes me a better marketing leader and able to bring sort of action-oriented marketing advice, which is designed to build revenue and pipeline. I have a kind of a saying, I don't think it's as famous as any of Zig Ziglar's sayings, but marketing exists for one reason, and that's to help sales sell more stuff. And I think if marketers can keep that in mind and build their relationships with sales reps and sales managers in their companies, that will go a long way, in driving those revenue goals.
So why do so many organizations have this struggle this battle between marketing and sales?
That is always perplexes me because you can imagine there are certain functions in the company where there's sort of inherent conflict, right? Marketing and finance. That's kind of inherent conflict because finance is counting the money and marketing is sometimes spending the money. Product and sales, because the sales guy sells something that product can't quite do yet. To me, marketing and sales are hand in glove. And today, that is more important than ever with the kind of data that we know about buyers and the buyer journey. And the fact that based on all the research out there, for example, from CEB, that 57% of the selling process is done before a customer or prospect engages with sales. As a sales guy, that's got to be incredibly scary because you used to control the process. The sales process started when you picked up the phone and called somebody and gave them information and took them down the journey. Now they can self-select. They can go do Google searches. They can talk to peers. They can get way more information than they can ever get before. And by the time they engage with you, they often already have an opinion about you and your products and your competitors. They already have a sense of what they want to spend, and you're coming into that cold. So you have to build a relationship with marketing because marketing is the 57%. It's your marketing team that is filling up that 57% with your website and with your sales promotions and with all the information that's out and available to buyers as they're starting that customer journey with sales.
Yeah, and we're really seeing things transition on the sales side and we talk to folks about be more of a guide to your customer, guide them, help them navigate the challenges that they're going to run into in that final 43%. Or if we look at it in the context of a football field, the final 43 yards. And depending on the type of product or service that you're selling, you may not actually engage with the customer until they're in the red zone. They're 20 yards away from the goal line, or they're 20% away from making the decision. And that's where things start to get ugly inside their organization, navigating the challenges that happen inside the company, navigating the negotiation, navigating procurement, navigating the decision process as they get down to those final couple of vendors that they may be looking at. And each one has that story that they're delivering. And what I think you'll find is most of the sales reps who are working for those other vendors will really focus on themselves rather than the customer. So you can differentiate yourself by focusing on the customer.
Absolutely. So true. I mean, I think the parallel for salespeople today is you're more like a concierge than ever. It's really a service business. And helping the customer navigate that dysfunction internally is a huge value. I've seen so many sales cycles where a really good rep is actually introducing the prospect to other people inside their own organization. You can't assume that everybody, just because they work for company XYZ, especially large companies. I mean, obviously, if you're in a smaller company, everybody knows everybody. But if you're selling to large companies, which I'm sure many of you are, you cannot assume that just because your prospect works for company X that they know everybody else in that company. And you can provide real value to help them navigate internally. The other piece, too, that sales reps, I think, are struggling with, and, it's just kind of the way it is now, and I don't think this is a fad, is, the demise of the individual decision maker, the solo decision maker.
Yep.
When I was, 25 years ago, when I was in my first sales job, I was selling a product where if I went into the buyer and I gave him Red Sox tickets and took him for dinner a couple times a year, he'd sign the PO. He would never put it out for a competitive bid. He was the one making that decision. I mean, those days are gone. And in some ways, maybe that's a good thing for organizations. I mean, clearly there was probably some waste and organizations are getting a better deal now, but procurement is increasingly in the mix. If you're selling a technology solution and you think you'll be able to do that without involving IT, forget about it. IT is going to get involved. Legal might get involved, office of the CFO. And if you can help the rep, help the customer, rather than sit back and go, oh, gee, I hope they don't call procurement, help equip that buyer and say, you know what, we think this is going to, we want to get this product implemented in 3 months. In order to do that, you probably want to bring in procurement now because it would be really unfortunate if they come in at the last minute. So let's involve them in the process now so they can help us craft this agreement and give us a much better chance of closing the finish line. If you can really equip your coaches, you're going to be much more successful in terms of getting some wins in the revenue column.
Absolutely. And this gets back to the networking conversation or networking point that you made earlier. You can take these best practices related to networking and building a network and use those to identify those other people of influence inside an organization. And then you can, when you're talking with the customer, you can ask them about Susie or Joe or Jane or Paul or whomever it is in context. And many times what you'll find is you as the salesperson, as the sales professional, or as the broader sales team that's working within an account in a really complex sale, you know more about the organization than that customer knows about their own organization. So that becomes another level of value that you're delivering to the relationship. So awesome stuff.
And this speaks a little bit to the relationship between sales and marketing, because I think a lot of salespeople may not realize this, but marketers know more about the prospects than ever before. There are these systems called marketing automation systems, and I wish they were called something else, because if they were called sales acceleration systems, salespeople would pay attention to them. But a marketing automation system is keeping track of the anonymous visitors to your website when they fill out a form, what they download, what pages they view, what videos they watch. So you might think you're dealing with Jane, to your point, Mike, but actually Paul and Susie and everybody else has been on your website and has downloaded something. And who came first? Who is bringing the other people? So I think partnering with marketing to get visibility into that 57% that's happening before you know about it with today's systems, and a lot of them integrate into CRM, that is where I think the sales and marketing relationship, that's a great foundation to build a relationship between sales and marketing, because that's when it's clear that you're both skating to the same goal.
Yeah. And earlier you had talked about innovation and how you're excited about a lot of the innovation that's happening in this space. I know that was focused on EdTech. So let's talk about innovation in general. And that could be either innovation on the marketing side, innovation on the EdTech side, innovation in general. What are you excited about when it comes to innovation in the circles that you're running in?
Yeah, I definitely would love to talk about the innovation happening in marketing, because I think it would be I'm acutely aware of it because I was a marketing major as an undergrad. When I went to business school, I sort of concentrated in marketing. And then I was in a tangential role for a while. I was running product. I was doing strategic partnerships. I was doing sales enablement. And I really wasn't in pure marketing for about 15 years. And the 15 years that I wasn't in marketing, a tremendous amount of stuff was going on. So if I think about when I was in marketing early in my career, right, we would take out an ad in a magazine. And I would, if somebody said, what's the value of that ad? I'd say, well, call me back in 6 months and I'll try to give you a guess. Today, I can put an ad up on LinkedIn or another digital channel, and I can tell you in 48 hours what the impact is. So the acceleration and the visibility, there's sort of a famous quote that 90% of your marketing budget is wasted. You just don't know which 90%. There's less excuse for that than ever now, because there are plenty of places to spend your money, and you have much, much better visibility in terms of the impact, the leads, the activities, the viral nature of your campaigns than ever before. So marketing has become a really precise, used to be sort of, if you think about the spectrum of art and science, used to be way over the art side. But today it's really gone much more to the science side, which is making it increasingly challenging for marketers, because you need to be creative and think about brand and think about messaging, but you also need to be able to parse a report and do a pivot table and do all sorts of stuff on the data side. So today's marketers are a really unique breed and really interesting, set of skills.
So this is a little bit, it might not resonate for all the sales pros that are listening, but this is more just personal interest. As you look at marketing and EdTech, and you think about driving engagement in organizations and driving learning and accelerating performance, are you seeing a convergence between marketing concepts and ideas and some of the innovation that's happening in the EdTech space?
Totally. So a couple of them. One is the consumerization. And you hear this a lot in various areas of technology, right? So the Sunday night to Monday morning difference. So Sunday night, what are you doing? You're on Netflix, you're on social media, you've got a tablet in one hand, you're watching TV in the other, and you're having real-time experiences with consumer websites, and probably you're ordering some e-commerce from Amazon that's going to arrive the next day.
And okay, that's Sunday night. Lose to the Pats too.
Well, we won't talk about that. And then the next morning, you go into your company systems and you log into your intranet, and the systems are from the mid 1990s. What is up with that? So they're, kind of my generation, the Gen X generation, we kind of consciously say, oh, well, we know that corporate systems are behind consumer systems, and that's just the way that it is. Millennials are coming in and they seriously just don't understand. They don't get it, and they won't engage with those systems. So those kind of dynamics are really changing what's happening, not only in education technology and corporate learning, but HR in general and corporate systems in general. People just no longer will want to interact with that crappy old user interface. They expect a Netflix or Amazon-like experience, whether you're talking about the HR benefit system, the payroll system, the learning system, any other systems. So that is creating a huge opportunity in the HR technology and education technology space. Add on top of that other technology trends such as mobile. People want to do everything from their mobile device. Things like social. People want to collaborate and integrate these kind of things together in a social way. That's caused the increase of tools like Slack, right? Which has taken over sort of the corporate collaboration space, kind of replaced email in a lot of organizations. So there's a tremendous amount happening on this front, and it's creating a ton of opportunity to do things better, to engage employees. The other factor that's going on too is, right now we're at sort of historic lows in terms of unemployment. It's an extremely tight labor market if you're in a knowledge type industry. So companies are desperately trying to recruit, retain, and keep and engage their employees. And all these tools and systems are a key part of that, key part of what they offer their employees.
Awesome. So on getting back on the marketing side of things and the work that you're doing, what are some of the common mistakes that early stage companies make when it comes to marketing? And what are some things that they can implement? I know this is a couple of questions in one, but what are some of the things that they can implement to get them on the right track, or at least get the things that they should be considering to get them on the right track?
Yeah. So I sort of see two extremes. One is companies who build a product, have it all the way to fruition, and then go, oh, shoot, didn't think at all about how we're going to market or sell this thing. And then they're scrambling, right? Yep. So that is something you want to avoid. The opposite end of the spectrum, you see people, building a huge brand for some new company, but the product is vaporware, right? Because again, in the tech space, I'm not focused on consumer products or anything else. So the product doesn't actually exist. So their marketing is way out ahead of when they actually have a product. So there's got to be a happy medium between those two things. So what I try to do is I try to work with early stage companies who have a viable product and help them to sort of skate to the puck so that when that product is ready for soft launch or hard launch or, some other set of market deliverables, that they have the marketing that back it up. And there's a lot that's needed. Not only the website, right? Your website is your number one marketing tool. Is the website there? Is it accurate? Does it have all the technology behind it to capture leads and to capture where the traffic's coming from? So that's one thing. You absolutely job number one. Sales enablement tools, don't discount that and don't leave it to sales. I mean, marketing really has to help to develop some of the messaging for the different personas that you might be selling to, the professional marketing materials like data sheets and decks and videos. All that stuff is sort of table stakes now. It needs to be good. People have no patience for sort of ugly marketing materials. It needs to be slick. It needs to look modern, and it needs to be really easy for them to download or consume or find on the site that they're on. So I think if companies, can try to align those two things together so that the product roadmap and the product availability is somewhat lined up with the sales and marketing readiness, you're going to be much more successful than if either of those are far out ahead of the other.
Awesome. What do you think about content marketing? Like, where does that, it's something that we just keep hearing more and more of. Is that a fad? Is there something real behind it? What's your take on content marketing?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting topic. I feel like we've maybe reached peak content marketing. I don't mean to say that it's a fad at all, but when I look and I see how many ebooks and webinars and infographics and blog posts and white papers and whatever else stuff that's out there, there's a lot of good stuff, but there's a lot of garbage as well. And I think that, that we know that the scarcest commodity is time. And if you want people to read this stuff, it better be valuable. And I do have a concern with so much junk out there that people are going to start to turn away from these resources and miss the really valuable ones. So I think you have to do it. I would suggest being creative. I think you can do a lot that's cheap and free, but also it still has to look good. But, from videos, you can do super authentic stuff. I think customer stories are kind of timeless. If a company gets to the point where they can see themselves being your customer, they want to know how other customers have done it. They want to know what the results are. And this whole storytelling approach, humans love stories. So to the extent that you can tell a story with your product, about your customer, that's going to be probably more impactful content than just, a whole bunch of statistics. But I do think, content marketing is here to stay because producing and distributing content is so much easier and so much cheaper than it ever used to be before. Content marketing has sort of always existed. In some ways, think about the Sears catalog. That was sort of content marketing. It was a catalog, but there was a lot of information. So content marketing is not really new. It's just digital content marketing. So I do advise people, to know about content. The other thing I would say is not all content is created equal. And I think this is perhaps good advice for the sales folks on the phone. So if your marketing guys and gals have produced some new infographic or some new piece, don't just fire that off to your customers because there is an appropriate audience and an appropriate stage in the buyer's journey which each content asset is part of. So if somebody's at a very early stage, they may not be ready for that customer case study yet, right? They may want to know basic information about your industry or help them even to scope the problem. So what I've done, and which I recommend people do, is a mapping exercise of their content marketing assets and map it to the stage in the buyer's journey. And there's some public resources about that. If you just Google that, you'll find, some best practices of when webinars are useful, when infographics are useful. But then also for these various buyers, right? So something that's appropriate for an IT buyer may or may not be appropriate for that procurement buyer. One of the sort of classic, examples or anti-examples, I guess, is don't give an infographic to an IT guy or gal. They just don't appreciate it. They think it's way too simplified. They do probably want that really chunky 10-page technical spec of how to, how your solution is secured in the cloud. So just think about the audience and think about the content assets you have. It's a little bit like why you, why now, right? So come back to that classic advice. Why am I sending you this? Why am I sending it to you now? Because I think it's going to help you progress along this buyer's journey.
It's so critical to know your customer. I mean, it just over and over again,
so
the
true.
common theme.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter who we've got on the podcast, know your customer, know your customer, know your customer. And so many of us out there are so focused on talking about all the cool things we're doing inside our organization, all the cool stuff that we have to deliver, these problems that we're going to solve. If you're that person, you're talking more about you than you are about them. So
yeah,
get back to the customer.
Along those lines, Mike. Yeah, something that I often ask, because I talk to a lot of people who are either entrepreneurs or marketers or sellers of a particular piece of technology. I ask every single one of them the same question. I might have asked you this too, Mike. Wave a magic wand. What is your perfect customer? So if this person called you on the phone, you'd be like, yeah. This is the guy or gal that we want to sell to. Meaning, what industry are they in? What size organization? What are their needs? What stage are they in? And it forces people to really think, because I think as marketers and sellers of products, we want to sell to anybody. And particularly, I think in sales, if you're carrying a quota, you're going to want to sell to anybody you can. But if you think about it and think about the unique value of your solution and the problems that it solves, there's probably some category of customer. And can you sort of double down and focus on that category? Not that you ignore if the phone rings from somebody else, but from an outbound perspective, from a positioning perspective, from an outreach perspective, both for sales and marketing, is there some way you can reach it? So if you decide that the insurance industry, companies of 5,000 or more in the insurance industry, that's your sweet spot. There's a ton of things you can do, from account-based marketing to targeted mobile advertising. There's a ton of stuff you can do, but it starts with identification. Because if you try to boil the ocean, you're very likely not going to be successful at all. So figure out where you can focus and really, really double down. And I've found it very interesting with customers, because I've done this with a few of my clients. If you say to a customer, you say you meet their person from that company, you say, oh, actually, we've identified company XYZ as a really good target for our product because of this, this, and this. I mean, that is incredibly powerful. People say, wow, you've thought about us, you've identified us. But tell me more. Let's do a demo. Let's set up a meeting, because it shows that you're not just praying and praying.
Pam, this was so great. There are two things that you said that really stuck with me, and I'm going to keep these in mind as I talk with prospects and future clients. The first is that people already have an opinion about you before they engage with you on sales or whatever you're selling. That's powerful to know. And the second is, why you and why now? I've never heard anybody explain it that way. So thank you for that.
Sure. Happy to do it. I think, it's just a new world that we're in. I think it is the new dynamic. And I've certainly seen sales folks be very successful when they employ some of these new strategies. There's always sort of a double-edged sword. It's much more complex to sell. We know that. We know there are a lot of competitors. Some industries, the barriers to entry are lower than they've ever been before. But you've got new tools to make you more powerful. And I just encourage people to embrace and take on all these tools to drive their careers.
Pam, where can people find out more about you? They've heard what you have to say. I know we're interested in learning more. Where can we find out what you're up to?
Yeah, probably the best thing to do would be to follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty good about posting interesting articles that I see and things from the industry. And that is at Pam_Boiros, which I'm sure you'll include a link in the description in the podcast, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Pam Boiros on LinkedIn. So I'd be happy to hear from any of the listeners and see if we can, continue the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pam. And thank you, Mike. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.